Witness. I am with Rainbow Push, League of Women Voters, IVI-IPO, Chicago Women Take Action. And for this particular event, I'm with Promote the Vote and Promote Equity Illinois. We're so excited to have all of you. We have a really fantastic panel, and I'm not going to prolong it. I'm going to give you two phone numbers, which I'll give you at the end of the night. One is 866-OUR-VOTE, and the other is 202-224-3121. The 866 number is for everything about voting, and 202 is how you call your congressman or your senator to talk about what you want them to do after you hear what our panelists are going to say tonight. I'd like to start by introducing our moderator, Mr. Lance Goff. He is the former executive director of the Chicago Board of Elections, a role which he has served in for over 30 years. Throughout his tenure as executive director, Mr. Goff was responsible for managing voter registration and election administration for over 1.5 million voters. He managed unprecedented changes in election administration, including the transition from punch cards to optical scanners and touchscreens, the introduction of electronic poll books, expanded registration with online and election day programs, and the launch of in-person early voting and no excuse vote by mail. Chicago has one of the most progressive elections in the country as a result of his leadership. Though he's retired, he continues to work with the board in an advisory committee. And I just want to say congratulations, Mr. Gao. He was awarded Election Official of the Year, August 2021 this year, and entered into the Elections Hall of Fame by the National Election Center. Thank you. I present to you some and introduce to others, Mr. Lance Goff, my friend.
Thank you so much, Betty. And it's an honor to be a moderator tonight. I'd like to start off with Dr. Barbara Arnwetty. She is well known in the election field, and she's with the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and your thoughts on the statute, the verdicts of what happened with Ahmaud Arbery. I'd like to have you start with your presentation, please, Doctor.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and good evening, everyone. This is quite an honor to be part of this program and to talk with you about one of the most important issues in our time, and that is the challenge of providing voting rights for all without these horrible voter suppression bills that have been introduced and passed in 19 states, over 33 vicious pieces of legislation. We're in a horrific era where gerrymandering for redistricting is happening in light of the census, and people are just doing everything they can to prevent the advent of the inevitable multiracial democracy. So I want to talk about the Freedom to Vote Act. I want to talk about the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and I want to talk about where we are right now and what the challenges are. So a couple things that you need to know. First of all, the biggest problem confronting us
Her internet was unstable. I think she might have lost us, and she may have to come back in, Mr. Goff.
You don't have me?
Yes, we have you. We have you now.
Okay. I am so sorry. I warned about this hotel, so let me try to do this really quick. A couple things. The Freedom to Vote Act is one of the most important pieces of legislation that's ever been put forth. It's the old For the People Act, but as amended and as shrunk down a little bit by the Manchin Compromise. But it still has in it some incredible provisions that we need. One, it makes Election Day a holiday for everybody. So there's no more of that, my boss won't let me vote.
Looks like we may have lost her again.
I am so sorry. Am I back again?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, I cannot fix this. I don't know what else to do. My iPhone usually is a great alternative, but it won't work for this one. But I just wanted people to know that it also has Election Day registration. It has automatic voter registration. It has early voting mandatory for 14 days at least. It has, most importantly, voter restoration for the formerly incarcerated. We know that right now in this country, there are 6 million people who are banned from voting because of these felon, quote, disenfranchisement laws. But we also know that there are I can. This is just ridiculous, but there are 9 to 17 million people who are confused about their right to vote, and they don't vote. They don't register to vote because they fear they're going to go to jail, like Crystal Mason did in Texas, and they think that those laws are universal laws, although they are state specific. The beauty of this act is also that it has some really great provisions around gerrymandering and stopping what we call election subversion, where states are legislatures are taking over the local boards of elections. So that's the beauty of the act. It's mandatory, it's uniform, it would apply to and everybody. In addition, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the beauty of that act, of course, is that it's always been there to catch states that have a history of racial discrimination in voting. And that act would now, it was eviscerated by the Supreme Court in 2013 in the Shelby versus Holder case. But this new act now would restore Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which prevents any jurisdiction with a history of voter discrimination, recent discrimination, from being able to enact any law, procedure, or practice without it being pre-cleared. Or either the Department of Justice or the courts to say that the act is in fact non-discriminatory. That I'm going to stop there, because one thing I just want to say really quickly before I disappear again is that we know facts. Don't ever let anybody tell you you don't. Now, right now, the sad news is that the Senate is coming back on the 7th, and they're talking about leaving on the 10th without passing any of these laws. We know that it's been filibustered, and many of us are saying that we got to end the filibuster, that we got to have filibuster reform. So whatever you do, be clear to say a couple things. Senate, don't leave until
Well, let's finish that. Don't let the Senate leave until they finish passing these acts. This act is like a safety net.
right.
It's a giant safety net for the
Right,
election.
And they should not, be saying that this is secondary to, quote, the economic bills. The Senate has historically been able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So this is a ridiculous proposition that we're dealing with. And we got the challenge of the calendar, and we got the challenge of gerrymandering. These states are gerrymandering like crazy. Ohio, North Carolina, Texas, you name it. They're just coming up with these horrible proposals, Wisconsin, etc. So the last thing, Ahmaud Arbery.
Barbara, if you turn off your video, would it be better?
I wonder. I have no clue.
Just see if it'll work better with the video.
Okay, let's try that and hope that that it'll be more stable. But the Ahmaud Arbery case, everybody knows that this is one of the worst cases of hate that we've seen. I mean, they literally lynched a Black man by chasing him down the streets and shooting him to death when he finally, tried to, get away again, and they intercepted him and shot him to death. But the tragedy is that this 1900s type of killing, this tragic lynching, would have gone unaddressed, but for the Ahmaud Arbery family, the mother and the father. Because what people don't know is that the father went down to the district attorney's office every single day for months, demanding that these guys be arrested for killing his son. And he demanded not only that they be arrested, he also demanded that the video be released, because they had heard about this video that was kept under wraps. And as everybody knows in this case, or may not know, the district attorney here was corrupt. And she basically, the day of the killing, right after it happened, Mr. Greg McMichael, the father, it was a father and son, Greg McMichael, and the son was Travis McMichael, and Brian Roddy Bryan was the other, third person who was involved. But what people don't know is that she told the police to not arrest them. She actually told Greg McMichael to go home and wash up. And he left the scene in the car that was used to pursue Mr. Arbery, and that he was shot in front of with the blood splatter and everything else. He drove that car home as they were processing the scene. So the car was never processed. There are no pictures of the car, of the truck that they drove, that they pursued him in. Nobody entered that truck. There's no evidence that was taken. And of course, he did not turn himself in to even go down to be interviewed for 2 hours afterwards. The same with Brian. He drove his truck home and he sat on his porch and didn't come down to the police station for hours. So these are the stories that had not the family fought so hard, this entire victory that we just talked about would never have happened, because these guys would never have been arrested. They never would have been prosecuted. They went through 2 prosecutors in a row who had to recuse themselves for misconduct in the processing of this case. There's so much more I could say, but what I really want to say is that there's nothing like voices of the people being heard. Betty Magnus is part of 100 people, 100 activists who showed up the first week in Brunswick, Georgia, and helped the community to turn out. I think that most people don't know that in many of these southeastern and southern Georgian counties, they threaten Black folks that if you vote, you'll lose your job. If you protest injustice, you'll lose your job. And frankly, there's a blacklist that's kept in some of these, it's called the blacklist, that's kept in some of these counties And it's so bad that if you go into many of the counties, you'll find out that the Black middle class are people who work in Atlanta and they come home on weekends, or they work in Florida, or they work in Alabama and they come home on weekends. And I know people don't believe that, but that is the reality. So when we came to Brunswick, people were scared to be seen, to stand beside the family, to support the family. Well, I can tell you that our activism changed that totally. By marching into the communities, by encouraging people to turn out, by creating an atmosphere of acceptance that this was so important. This was about the future of this entire county. We were able to turn it around. And by the time we left, Betty, your first 100 had become 10 times that number. So we had thousands of people who participated in daily court watches and demanding justice for Ahmaud, so much so that you saw Kevin Goff, the same lawyer that said he didn't want any Black pastors. You got to understand that he had already filed 6 motions to evict Transformative Justice Coalition because of that poster that you're seeing in the back.
Doctor?
So that's it, everybody. I can, of course, answer questions and do more. I really apologize for this internet. I have had this problem this whole time I've been here, but I've been able to use my iPhone as a substitute, and it works beautiful. But I had no idea it would not be able to accommodate this format. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you so much for your words. Our next panelist will speak, and it's Frederica De Rosa, who is the policy organizer for Chicago Votes, voting rights in prison. And she's been working on Senate Bill 828.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you all for having me to speak on this panel today. I'm excited to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing at Chicago Votes and some of the things that we can look forward to championing in the coming years. Like Lance said, my name is Frederique Jarizier. I studied political science and African American studies at UIC, and I work with Chicago Votes as their policy organizer. And most of my work at Chicago Votes has been around advancing Senate Bill 828, which is a piece of legislation that is sponsored by Representative LaShawn Ford that would restore the rights to people who are incarcerated, that would restore their voting rights. So we've been working closely with some of the amazing people at the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and a lot of the Alliance for Reentry, the Sentencing Project, and a whole bunch of amazing organizations that have supported our work. And so just to give a little bit of context and background, in 2019, Senate Bill 2090 was passed, which was legislation that Chicago Votes worked on that increased access to the ballot box for people who are in jail. And it also made Cook County Jail a polling location. So our logical next step was looking at what next can be done. And so in Illinois, you are allowed to vote if you are in jail, but your right to vote is stripped away if you are serving time due to a criminal conviction. So if you are convicted of a crime, but you're not serving a sentence, you can still vote. But if you are serving a sentence, you cannot. And people in prison are the last remaining groups of citizens that are disenfranchised in Illinois. We see this as a vestige of Jim Crow and the continuation of the legal effort to minimize the power of communities who are over-policed and have high rates of mass incarceration. In America, there are 2 states that allow voting in prison, Maine and Vermont. And recently, Washington, D.C. has allowed people who are in prison to vote. Maine and Vermont are a little bit different because they are predominantly white, and so is their prison population. In Illinois, it's different because we have a prison population that is 55% Black. In attempting to move this legislation, we have faced opposition, of course. There are people who believe that this bill is not constitutional and requires a constitutional amendment. And there are some that believe, based on their philosophy, that people who are in prison should have their rights stripped away as part of their punishment. And so we know this is problematic on a few different reasons, but we are trying to start a conversation around what citizenship looks like, and that people who are incarcerated are citizens and are still people and deserve to have their rights heard. So on October 17th, last month, during the veto session, Senate Bill 828 came to the House floor for a vote, and it received 57 yes votes. The good news is that there are at least 57 legislators in the House that support this bill. But the bad news is that in order to pass a bill off of the House floor and send it to the Senate chamber for consideration, it has to have at least 60 votes. So that left our bill 3 votes short of the requirement to pass the bill. Fortunately, our sponsor, Rep. Ford, he postponed the bill, which is just basically a legislative maneuver that allows us to put the bill on pause, make sure that we have all of our votes, and then we can bring it back to the floor for consideration. And that is our plan in January. But in the meantime, one of the conversations that we want to start having is about mass incarceration and how we can be critical of our carceral system that puts people away as a means of punishment. But we know these people are still people. They are mothers, they are brothers, they are sisters, they have families who are still on the outside. And so whether or not citizens have the right to vote isn't just a matter of prejudice and racism. It's about whether or not Illinois and America in general is interested in having a true democracy that represents all of us. So there have, as we've talked about just now, that there are recent national and statewide efforts to restrict access to the ballot. And to me and to all of us, that should be scary, because it means that it's not just an instance of our government becoming unresponsive to our constituents, but rather the government deciding who deserves to have their voice heard and who doesn't. And so we know that people who are incarcerated and likely to serve a sentence if they are convicted are mostly people of color and mostly Black people. So we're seeing that our American legal system now, with what's going on with the Ahmaud Arbery case, and also recently with the findings of the case in Kenosha, we are seeing that our American legal system is flawed, and it continues to perpetuate the violence against our communities and strip our voices away. We know that 95% of people who are in prison return to their communities. We know that reentry can be a difficult process, but having strong ties to your community increases the chances that your reentry process will be successful. And so this issue is particularly pressing because the needs of disenfranchised people who are in prison, are not often considered by elected officials. So they have no leverage to push back on candidates on issues that they care about. And those issues are free education, restoring Pell Grants, paying for college education, reducing long sentences. And we know that this exclusion is particularly affecting our Black and low income communities. So we've been working alongside lawmakers and advocates to pass this bill, ensuring that communities who have high rates of incarceration and anyone is able to cast their ballot and know that their ballot has been received and counted. And we know that this effort will benefit communities across Illinois. And so I want to take this moment to invite all of you all to participate with us, make some noise about this issue. We want to make sure that the legislators in Springfield and across the nation know that this is an issue that our people care about, and that if we are truly interested in creating a participatory democracy that values all people's voices, and are truly interested in ending the racism and Jim Crow-esque era and get us towards a society that values all people, this just seems like our logical next steps. So if you're interested in getting involved, I could send you information on how you can connect with your legislator and make sure that they vote yes when the bill comes back around in January. And yeah, that's basically it. And I am looking forward to answering questions a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You forgot to comment that you made a comment, and so true, pretrial detainees. Here's somebody hasn't even been sentenced. They're in jail because A, they can't make bond. Most of them can't make bond. And to give them the right to vote was something that we worked at the Chicago Board of Election along with Project Vote in the Cook County Clerk's Office. And believe it or not, it's one of the largest polling places in the United States. It's one of the few polling places that's in a prison. So I'm very proud of that. So thank you for your help on that. Thank you so much. Okay, I'd like to bring in our next panelist, Attorney Ami Gandhi from the Senior Council of Chicago Lawyers for Civil Rights. Ami?
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all this evening, especially with esteemed colleagues working together to protect voting rights. Again, I'm Ami Gandhi with Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and I wanted to share a little bit about me. I lead our organization's voting rights work for Illinois and Indiana, and we're a nonpartisan nonprofit group focused on advancing racial equity. Our organization has been around for 50 years, since the civil rights era, and one of the areas that we focus on is racial inequity in voting. It's important to understand that our country's founding election system was set up for only a select group of people to vote, namely white land-owning men. And even in Illinois, there were explicit bans on, for example, Black people being able to vote that lasted far longer than they should have, that lasted until the late 1800s. Despite our incredible progress over the years to expand the franchise, the racist roots of this system continue to show up in our elections, and that especially impacts Black and Brown voters. Even when some of those aspects of our election system unintentionally at this point block voters, it's still unacceptable, and it's still something that we're fighting to change. In Illinois, here's an example of this that I wanted to share with you all. In Illinois, the voter registration rates for voters of color still lags behind those of white voters. And it's great to have tools like election day registration, automatic voter registration that we're fortunate to have in Illinois, but there's additional work that's clearly needed if we want to actually level the playing field. We've observed in the Illinois voting rights work that we do that voters of color often face subtle and multi-layered barriers. Things like an unexpected change in a polling location or a polling place closure, for example, or a poorly implemented language access program. Those kinds of barriers can make the difference between an eligible voter casting their ballot or staying silent. In 2020, persistent racial disparities in our voting system were brought into sharp focus. There's no doubt that the right to vote freely without discrimination and without fear is under threat throughout the country and locally as well. I want to remind everyone that progress is certainly possible. Last November, we faced the perfect storm for voter suppression. We have been in a global pandemic, which has forced unprecedented changes to our elections. And on top of that, in last year's election cycles, we had a federal administration trying to intimidate and confuse voters with misinformation about voter fraud and other ways that voter access was restricted. We also had renewed threats facing Black community members and other people of color, including police violence. All these obstacles were not enough to keep voters away in the end in the 2020 elections. Thanks to motivated voters, activists, election officials, and others who worked together to secure vote by mail and also importantly, other voter access options as well. The 2020 election had the highest voter turnout of the 21st century. At Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, we believe that the right to vote is fundamental to a healthy democracy. Our team works to protect voting rights, especially in communities of color and low-income communities. We do that through providing comprehensive election protection at 866 Our Vote, We also provide advocacy for stronger laws and policies, such as the phenomenal voting in prison legislative proposal that you heard my colleague Freddie talk about. And as a last resort, if the collaboration type approach with our government leaders does not sufficiently work to protect voting rights, as a last resort, we bring litigation to enforce voter access laws. Most importantly, we believe that individuals and communities most impacted by systemic barriers, most impacted by disenfranchisement, should be driving the ideas and policies to improve and strengthen our democracy. We want to do everything we can to lift up the voices and the policy solutions posed by incarcerated and returning community members, eligible voters who are still in the process of learning English, and others who are closest to our modern day voter access barriers that we are facing. Thank you so much.
Ami, thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Jay Young, Executive Director of Common Cause. Let us know about redistricting process in Illinois, would you please? Jay, there you go.
I will do my level best, and I will try to keep most of the trauma out of my voice that I've experienced sort of dealing with redistricting this year. I'm hoping that everyone caught the wisdom of the ordering of the speakers tonight. It's a sandwich. It starts with the good word. It starts with not just Miss Betty giving you a call to action, letting you know what you need to do when it comes to talking to your elected officials in DC to make sure that we get the Freedom to Vote Act passed, to make sure that we get the John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed. But it also talked about those two transformative bills, which address a lot of the problems that we're hearing about, a lot of the opportunities for improvement in our democracy. And I guess what we're all here to tell you is that we do have a lot of work to do, particularly when we think about the way that power is held. So at the core of our electoral system, the core of our series of our representative government is this idea that the governors, those elected officials, have to know who they're governing. That process is determined by what we all remember going through just recently, the census, the decennial census, the one that comes out every 10 years. That process, we count every person living in this country, regardless of their citizenship status, regardless of their political preference, we count them all. Once you get that data, you then determine through a process called apportionment how many representatives each state has in the House of Representatives in Congress. So we went through that process in the midst of a pandemic, and probably the most difficult census we've seen. We went through that process. Frankly, Illinois did very well. Thanks in large part to a lot of you that are on this call tonight. The states then take the data that we were given and use that to draw the legislative maps that are going to govern us for the next 10 years. That's the process that we've been going through now. The challenge, though, is that because of this ongoing zombie apocalypse we've all been living through, they've had to make some changes. In Illinois, we had the distinction of having not only an early election cycle, with a very early March primary next year. But we also had constitutional language that was forcing a rapid resolution of our legislative maps. In Springfield, beginning this spring, we saw the members of the General Assembly, the majority party, which has a trifecta, as we all know. We saw them use those sort of unique circumstances that Illinois faces to their advantage. And in Illinois, gerrymandering is a word we all know. It's a dirty word that's part of our democracy. And I'm here to tell you that it happens by Republicans. It happens by Democrats. And in Illinois, we tend to draw our maps, not historically, we've done it just to ensure that the folks in the General Assembly stay in power. That's usually what we do. Usually we think of our maps as just being uncompetitive. This year was a little bit different, in part because of the circumstances that I described, but in part because of, well, there's a trifecta, you can do it. We saw dozens and dozens of hearings this year as our General Assembly tried to sort through the legislative maps for this cycle. Those hearings were marked most importantly by the fact that in all of those hearings, for the most part, the witnesses had nothing to comment on. The maps weren't shared until just before the votes that were taking place. I think what you saw, there's a nonpartisan group out there called the Princeton Gerrymandering Project that gives us grades for our maps. Our House map got a C. We did pretty good when it comes to partisanship, not so great when it comes to sorry, my brain just locked there for a second. We did not so great when it came to competitiveness, but when it came to actually breaking up communities, we got an F. We got an F when on our Senate map, where, and honestly, when we came to our congressional map, for a while we were being described as having one of the worst gerrymandered maps in the country. Some other states, unfortunately, came after us, and they did a much worse job. But what I guess I want you all to understand is that while we all have friends in elected office, and honestly, I appreciate folks who are called to service, power is alluring. And sometimes it makes you make decisions that benefit yourself, the elected, as opposed to benefiting the communities that you're purporting to represent. So that's sort of the state level. I initially, folks were asking me to talk a little bit about what's happening in the city of Chicago right now. I'm happy to go into that a little bit later. I know we want to keep moving on with questions. That's a completely different process. It's particularly acrimonious. And honestly, I expect it to go to a referendum, if not ultimately get decided in the courts, in some time. So
Well,
short version of all that, it's been a mess.
There was a hearing today. Could you tell us what happened at the hearing today?
So one of the things that has been an underlying factor in our state is the way our population has shifted. At the base level, there's been two sort of big changes. There have been a lot of Black folks that have moved out of the south and west sides of the city. They've moved first out to the suburbs, and many have moved out of state. As a result, there is an expectation that the number of seats held by Black either alders in the city of Chicago, and the same thing happened at the state level. You would expect to see their number of seats drop. At that same time, the Latino population over the last decade has in many places grown or at least held steady. So you would expect to see a larger slice of the pie held by members of the Latino caucus. And those two dynamics were in stark relief today, where the Latino caucus has presented its map, expanding the number of Latino wards. It's my understanding that any map that of the city that does not include 15 Latino wards is a non-starter. And the Black caucus has its proposal trying to hold on to seats. And what ultimately came down is that the Latino caucus, which went and did its own thing, made its own, honestly, very well sort of put on production, but didn't really, or at least the accusations are that they weren't really negotiating with some of their colleagues in the city process. So it was one of the most disappointing public hearings that I've been to, where you had elected officials calling each other racists, claiming misogyny, text messaging others while they're talking, claiming that they're gaslighting them. Like, it was not the sort of hearing that you want to bring your kid to teach them about how our system of government should work. There is an expectation that there is a map. The city is supposed to have a map determined by December 1. So there is word out there that there's a map that has, at least 39 votes behind it. But it wasn't released today. There'll be another hearing tomorrow and probably the day after. But it was just, there was a lot of ugliness on display today. Not a lot of transparency, almost none of that, but a lot of ugliness.
Well, thank you for that honesty, because yes, I heard the exact same thing. What I'd like to do is, because of your comments just now and other people, I received a message from someone saying, with all this going on, why should I vote? And, people died for the right to vote, but they're tired of listening to me. I'd like for them to listen to some of you other, Jay, to you, Ami. Would you please talk about that? Because I've done it until I'm red in the face.
Ms. Gandhi, go, please start.
I still would like to hear your thoughts on this too, Lance, even if you feel red in the face about trying for years. Clearly you've inspired people and will continue to inspire people to vote. There is a lot of messaging that we hear in Illinois communities and Chicago communities that that voters should be grateful for what we have, that look at all the renowned leaders that we have, all the signs of progress, all the signs of progress when it comes to social justice and racial justice. If our community members are telling us that that's not enough, that means a lot to me. If our community members are telling us that they want more and we want more in terms of equity, in terms of progress, in terms of fair opportunities, then it's a reason to keep showing up to vote and to keep taking seriously the right to vote. If we felt like we have it achieved, we have it covered, we're all prospering as we should, then maybe we're done with participating vigorously in our democracy. But clearly that's not the case. People are in pain. People are crying out for progress in our marginalized communities. And that's part of what we saw on display at this hard to watch redistricting hearing today. It's part of what we've seen on display also in the state level of redistricting that's under litigation right now by us and other advocates for racial equity, because we don't feel that we should have to settle for discrimination and racial inequity in 2021 in Illinois. And as long as there's more work to do, I know that there are a lot of motivated people out there. Sometimes the most marginalized community members who maybe get the least of a fair opportunity are among the most motivated to vote. So when we hear that, as voting rights advocates and attorneys, when we hear about that level of sincere motivation and perseverance, it's really eye-opening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jay?
I just rambled for a while, so I'll try to keep my word count low. So my first answer is there is a well-organized, well-paid effort to stop you from voting. And if that alone, the folks who are trying to take your voice from you, isn't enough to make you understand how valuable your voice is, how valuable your vote is, let me just say, I think that should be a motivating factor. Your vote is your voice. Those seats in office do not belong to the folks that are sitting in them. They belong to you. Your communities belong to you. Your kids, your healthcare, the sidewalks, all of that is you. And all of that only gets expressed. Your will is only expressed when it comes time to walk into that ballot box and find somebody who speaks for you, who comes from your neighborhood, knows the problems that you face. There will always be those who are going to try to convince you that it's not worth your time, or the system's rigged, or it's broken. Don't get it twisted. There are folks who are trying their level best, if not to rig the system, to lie to you and tell you that the system was already rigged, so you might as well stay home. The only way we overcome is if we work together. The only way we overcome is if we all lift our voices up.
So true.
I'd like to hear from Dr. Arnwine on that question.
I was looking for the doctor.
She's there.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh.
Yes, I'm trying to manage this internet. But anyway, I think that people really need to think about what kind of world they want to live in, because voting determines everything about that world. You know, this criminal justice system is all about who we vote in for judges, who we vote in for prosecutors, who we vote in as sheriffs. You know, we have a lot of say, clerk of court, all of these are within our means. But unless we believe that our vote has power to effectuate our vision, our representation, unless we believe that, then we do not engage. And I think that it's so important that people not see voting just as a process, just as something that you do, but it's something that should be result oriented. Because at the end of the voting period, that's not the end of democracy. Democracy is much more. It's 365 days a year. And if you're to
Doctor?
I think she was lost. I had a question for Frederica, Mr. Goff.
yes, again.
Oh,
But I just end that spot saying we want to see our votes work for us. That's what we always have to be pushing for. And when people say, why should I, that's saying like, why should I breathe? I mean, it's part of life. If you're going to, you know, we all work, we all live, we all strive for the life that we want. And part of that life is what our governance system looks like. And so unless you see it as somehow alien and alienated and not part of your life, then you would not engage. But I think most people understand that there is something for voting, but they feel left.
Lance, do you want me to give
And that's my comment.
the question
Thank you,
for
Doctor.
Frederica?
Yes, Frederica.
Frederica, I don't see the question anymore. I tried to write part of it down, but the question was, how would people in prison know who to vote for? And is there any concern about gang intimidation in prisons?
I first want to say that we have made sure that throughout writing the bill, we have included currently and formerly incarcerated people who have helped to make sure that we are addressing these kinds of concerns. But folks who are incarcerated are still very much in communication with their loved ones, can have access to television, campaign mailers, newspapers, and other media. And also there has been a lot of work, and I'm not sure if Ami wants to speak to it as well, about civics in prison, and how that has been ongoing, developing in prison to make sure that folks who are incarcerated have access to information regarding it and their rights.
In
And
fact,
the Know Your Rights bill, if you could talk about that, Ami, the Know Your Rights.
Thanks so much, Miss Betty, and also to Freddie. definitely agree that if there's a threat of lack of information or a threat of voter intimidation, some of the really unique circumstances that incarcerated community members find themselves in, that's simply not a good enough reason to disenfranchise that population. If we're concerned about their rights to educational material and their rights to be an informed voter, then let's work together to make that kind of education possible. And we've heard time and time again that peer-led education is really the way to go. I don't think any of us want a preachy type of message when it comes to voting or elections or our democracy. And so that's why incarcerated community members thought about and envisioned and helped write and pass the Civics in Prison bill 2 years ago that is now being implemented across the prisons in Illinois, so that people can learn about when they will be eligible to vote under current law, what types of issues in their neighborhoods and their communities and our families are going to be at stake at the ballot box. And there are some sample materials even that are out there, some phenomenal materials created by Chicago Votes, for example, in partnership with incarcerated and returning community members. I dropped a link in the chat to a flyer that's been used in Cook County Jail, going back to what Lance shared earlier about people in pretrial detention who currently are eligible to vote. And in the instance of Cook County Jail, who have access to in-person voting in the place where they are detained. And the link that I shared is material that was shared in Cook County Jail in connection with this year's suburban municipal election. And the approach was informed by, again, people who have been in the jail environment, who kind of had ideas in mind about what information they were looking for, as well as experts like Chicago Votes, Dr. Christina Rivers from DePaul University, who's dedicated a lot of her career to collaborating with incarcerated community members. And so there's a lot of models to draw from when it comes to how to create a safe and informed voting environment, even in places like prison and jail.
Thank you so much, Ami. Just to let you know, one of the titles in this discussion, does my vote still count? I just wanted to say, yes, I've retired from the Chicago Board of Election. I spent my 32 years as executive director to make sure that everybody who was qualified to vote could vote. And I'm just letting you know that even though I have retired, the Chicago Board has still kept that going. And I'm very proud of the chairman. She's done an excellent job, my other board members, and our new executive director. So I'm saying that, yes, your vote will still count, and it always will. So Betty, you had some other items that we were talking about.
I wanted to hear a little bit more from Dr. Arnwine on the Arbery case and what's going to happen with the prosecutor in that case, if she could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes.
Doctor?
Yes, the good news is that the same day that the verdict came out, the prosecutor turned herself into jail, and she made bond at $10,000, and there will be a full case. And I think it's important, people don't understand how much corruption there is, especially here in Southern Georgia with prosecutors, and how much they are in league and corrupt with law enforcement officers. This particular prosecutor had a history of not prosecuting law enforcement officers for their crimes against people. And there's so many cases that have never been looked into because she covered them up. She just constantly protected these, racist, these irresponsible, reckless police officers. So there's a lot still to be told about the story, not only in this county, but listen, all over Georgia, we got these stories. And I know people are saying, Barbara, all over the country, we have these stories. And that's why we got to really make our vote work for us. We got to be careful. We got to be very, very determined when we vote that we're voting for a particular purpose, a particular change that must happen, and we got to get it. If it doesn't happen, then we vote out the people who aren't doing what they should be. And remember that this prosecutor is no longer in office, not because she was taken out of office over her misconduct. She's not in office because the Arbery family helped organize a write-in candidate who was able to get on the ballot and defeat her. It was the first time in the history of this county that an incumbent prosecutor had been defeated. So I do think that just shows you the power of the people when they organize. And Ruby Arbery will tell you that up until that moment, when they all went and voted, that her family had a history of not voting. But when they saw what that prosecutor did and trying to cover up the murder of Ahmaud, they became very aware how important voting was and how important all these different criminal justice positions were, electoral positions were. So she will tell you that they became avid, really dedicated voters. And right now they go around the county encouraging people to vote. And they're some of the best voter registration people I ever seen, because they really are amazing and urging people to vote and to understand why, based on their story, why it's critical to vote for the right people. Also, I just want to say, the whole Arbery case is an example of what happens when communities are organized and when communities stick together and when communities come together, because a lot of what we saw in that jury, remember, all of us hated that the defense excluded 11 of the 12 Black jurors. And everybody thought that this was going to be another jury nullification case, where the white jury would say, we don't care about the facts, we're just going to free the white people, which we've seen in too many cases. But the good news here is that because there was such a community ethos of anger about this racial hate that these guys symbolize, that they really, I can tell you, because I watched the voir dires, the questioning of the jurors, and I can tell you as many whites expressed anger at what had happened to Ahmaud as did Blacks. People just couldn't take it. They just said they didn't want this to be the future that their children would grow into, and that they felt that these guys had to be held accountable, so that there would not be not only not a recurrence of this kind of action by others, but that it had to send a signal to the entire community that they could be better, that they could stand up and really fight for racial equality in a way that they've never fought for in the history of this county. So I just think it's been, this case has not just been a victory in the sense of the convictions, but it's been a victory in the sense of the conviction of the hearts of the people of this community. It's really been transformative. I see it every day. I see it every single day that I'm here. And I am here in Brunswick right now, which is why I have such bad internet, which is a reminder about these internet deserts that exist all over Georgia, all over other southern communities, and all in Black neighborhoods, et cetera. So that's another issue that we have to continually address. But I just really want to say that I have seen a real change in this community in the last 2 years that I've been working here, off and on. And I live in the DC area. And one thing I did want to say to everybody is that if you are interested in trying to get the Senate to do what it needs to do, we are having a major action on December the 7th in Washington, DC, where we are going to be calling on the Senate to go ahead and do its job and pass these bills to get rid of the filibuster and to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the and the Freedom to Vote Act. So we are so hopeful that we will get this job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, in other words, we should vote like our life depends on it, correct?
There you go. I mean, and vote with all your heart and be a voting rights champion. The thing I love about the Arbery's is not only are they voting, they're out there championing and encouraging other people to vote. And a lot of times that's all people need is some encouragement, some assistance, some support. That's all they need. And we don't think about the fact that if you don't have a car and you don't have money for public transportation, and of course here in Brunswick there is no such thing as public transportation. It doesn't exist. So those are real barriers, and so you need rides to the polls. You need people to be able to be informed of when the vote is actually, when early voting starts. How you can participate. People just don't know these basics. So there's a lot of ground, feet to the groundwork that has to be done regularly to basically sustain this democracy, because it has a tremendous need to be reformed and revitalized.
I think, Betty, should we end because it's 8 o'clock right now?
I think we can end, but I would like at least each panelist, if they can give us an action. Barbara just gave us one. I'd like each panelist to give us an action on how we can assist in what they're doing. I know Frederica can give us some more insight on who we need to call in order to get 828 passed. Will that be the same bill number in January, Frederica?
Yes, it'll be the same.
Each panelist could do that for us. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Frederica? You're first.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for everyone who is here today. And it is exciting to see all this excitement around voting. If you want to get involved with our work around Senate Bill 828, please call your legislators, your state representative, and also your state senator. Let them know that you care about this issue. Let them know that you are looking to see how they will vote in January. You can also ask them if they'll become a co-sponsor on the bill. And in addition to that, we will be having advocacy evenings where we will have just an organized space for people to reach out to their elected officials and to make sure that people know who their elected officials are. And if you follow Chicago Votes on social media, on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter, you can see more opportunities to get involved. But the biggest ask that we have is that you reach out to your lawmaker and let them know that this is an issue you care about and that they should vote yes for Senate Bill 828. Thank you.
Ami.
Remember to call us at 866 our vote if you have questions or concerns about voting. Of course, we get the most flood of calls during election day, and we love to get those calls, but we also get calls at other times of year when people are concerned and want some clarification about how to exercise their voting rights. Look forward to hearing from you. You can contact us at 866 our vote. Thank you.
Jay?
Sure. So usually what I tell people to do is first, learn who your local elected officials are. If you can't tell me right now who your state rep is, who is your town village president, if you can't name your alderman, go find that out tonight. So that's the first thing I want you to do. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to make a plan for something that you can do over the next 3 to 5 months that it's actually going to get you physically doing something. That can be writing a postcard. That can be signing up with organizations like Common Cause or the Lawyers Committee or somebody to do election protection work, or get a sign and get on some tennis shoes and get out in the street and march. So do something physical. I said before that I think the fact that we started this conversation out talking about the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Advancement Act, that solves a lot of the things that we have been talking about tonight. And as you've heard, the Senate needs to do its job. Right now, at least the Dems in Illinois have all sort of given varying levels of commitment. We need our senators to speak up more. So that's an ask. And what we really need to do is we really need to reform or abolish the racist filibuster. So when you're talking to Senator Duckworth's office, when you're talking to Senator Durbin's office, that's what you need to tell them to do. Reform or abolish.
And if you need any information, the internet's a great tool. You can go to the State Board of Elections website, the Chicago Board of Elections website, Cook County's website. You can get the information there. It's at the touch of a computer. So please. Betty.
I would like to thank all of you, Mr. Goff, Miss Ami, Miss Frederica, Jay, who I consider one of my proteges, and especially Dr. Barbara Armwine for all that you have given to us and all you've done on behalf of this country with the Transformative Justice Coalition. I hope that this panel discussion was helpful to you. On behalf of Promote the Vote and our leader, Jan Swartz, and our coordinator, Patrick Watson, I would like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We will be doing these events once a quarter, so look forward to hearing from us, and feel free to contact any of our panelists. They put their information in the chat box, and Dr. Armwine's information is tjcoalition.org. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Armwine. But thank you all so very, very, very much. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't ask if our leader wanted to say a few words. Jan, do you want to say something?
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I am so proud of the program that you all gave on. I learned so much, and I feel we're all activated to take action. Everybody who registered for this event, we will send you an email with the points that everybody made about what we can do going forward. I thank our panel. You were amazing. You were just amazing. Thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for sharing it with us tonight.
No, thank you for putting this together.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.